Hey, you. You're finally awake. You were trying to browse Twitter, right? Hey fellas, today we're going to do something a little different. So Microsoft has just purchased ZeniMax Studios. Now you may be asking yourself, and I wouldn't necessarily blame you, who the hell is ZeniMax Studios? Well, they're the parent company of none other than Bethesda Game Studios. What does that mean? What could all this legalese translate to? Well, to put it into plain terms, Fallout is now an Xbox IP. Elder Scrolls is now an Xbox IP. Doom is now an Xbox IP. Quake is now an Xbox IP. Starfield is now an Xbox IP. Wolfenstein is now an Xbox IP. Rage is now an Xbox IP. Dishonored is now an Xbox IP. Prey is now an Xbox IP. And The Evil Within is now an Xbox IP. Now, of course, this isn't just the IPs being acquired. So this also means Bethesda Game Studios is now an Xbox Game Studio developer. id Software is now an Xbox Game Studio developer. ZeniMax Online is now an Xbox Game Studios developer. Arcane Studios is now an Xbox Game Studios developer. Machine Games is now an Xbox Game Studios developer. AlphaDog Games is an Xbox Game Studio developer, and I'm not personally familiar with them, but Roundhouse Studios is now an Xbox Game Studios developer. This is obviously game-changing news. Now we have to immediately jump to the ramifications of such a purchase. Obviously, we have all the aforementioned information, but there's a whole platform that's essentially out of the equation for this whole purchase. Sony. Now, Bethesda has released a statement that seems to indicate that for the time being, Bethesda Games titles will not be exclusive to Xbox, but that of course could mean multiple things. It could mean that it isn't only going to release on Xbox consoles and still release on PC, withholding release on PlayStation 4/5, or it could mean that it is going to be releasing on all platforms. Either way, Bethesda Games is just one of the 7 studios that Microsoft has just purchased, as a result, and brought under the umbrella. We've heard nothing about Doom or its general prospects with this news factored in. Call it a hunch, but I imagine it will soon be getting news about these games and developers no longer developing for Sony's platform. Now, I'm again not explicitly stating that this is the case, but we may need to prepare for a world where ZeniMax's entire catalog is withheld from Sony's platforms going forward. And if this is the case, people are going to be hard-pressed to stick with Sony's platform when Fallout time rolls around, or when Doom Guy comes knocking again. Ultimately, here's my opinion on the subject. Microsoft didn't simply purchase ZeniMax to have the name. They bought them as a dominative strategy to completely shift the tide of the console wars in their favor. I won't pretend to speak for Microsoft and pretend to know their full plans, but I'd say it's a safe bet that at some point, all these titles will become exclusive to their platform, in much a similar way that their strategy is now, releasing on Xbox and PC, with an occasional extension to the Switch possibly in the mix, as they really aren't directly competitive, and Microsoft's products being available on Nintendo's platform really only serve to benefit both parties in that scenario. I can't really tell you for certain that this is what will play out, and I'm certainly no business major. I just hope I can make some sense of all of this insanity, and you guys kind of have a better understanding of what exactly is going on. Anyway, now that I've stooped to generic gaming news, I'm going to go ahead and tell you to physically assault my subscribe button, antagonize the like button, and also hit up the little bell icon so I can annoy you in a much more direct sense through unavoidable push notifications. See you guys later. Hey, you. You're finally awake.